Hello everybody and welcome back to more political chatter. In this video we will be talking about an election prediction between President Joe Biden, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. So Tim Scott a few days ago did announce that he was forming an exploratory committee to run for president in 2024. He will almost certainly run for president. I do not believe that he will be nominated by his party, but this is a fun matchup to do, and just in case, let's do it. So, Joe Biden running for re-election. Tim Scott is an African American senator, the only African American senator who's a Republican, and Tim Scott will probably open the the GOP voter base to a more socially diverse base, but at the end of the day, it probably wouldn't change things up that much, so much so that it changes the outcome of the election. I don't think that Tim Scott would be any super special, particularly strong candidate, but I think it would be close, and let's get into this prediction. So I think that Joe Biden would win California, Washington, Oregon solidly, Hawaii, DC, Maryland, Delaware, New York, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Maine's first. Those would all be safe. Safe states for Tim Scott, Utah, Wyoming. And safe states are states that will be decided by more than 15%, by the way. Kansas is safe. That goes back into the safe column. It was not in 2020. South Carolina would become safe because he is from South Carolina, of course. That shifts to the right a couple points, and that will be it. So that puts Joe Biden at 141 electoral votes, Tim Scott at 122. So if we're just looking at safe states, it's a lot less for the Democrats than they usually get, but there will be quite a few likely states for them that would otherwise be safe. So likely states are states that will be decided by 5 to 15%. Let's get into those now. New Jersey, Connecticut, and Maine at large. All will be. But 3, mostly New Jersey and Connecticut, though, along with Illinois. 3 states that are very Democratic, but would not quite be safe with Tim Scott as the GOP nominee. With Donald Trump as the GOP nominee, I do believe that these 3 states, along with Maine at large, that these 3 states would be safe. But with Tim Scott, I don't see it. New Mexico will definitely be a likely state, along with Colorado, especially Colorado, that has been shifting Democratic for a few years now. Democrats now do very well winning their statewide races by safe margins a lot of the time. Let's see. Okay, I'm trying to think here. Honestly, I really have no hope for the Virginia GOP. I mean, Terry McAuliffe was just such a horrible candidate. I honestly see Virginia being likely. That would be a 5-point win for Biden. That could very well be lean, though. But yeah, I think that it is becoming more of a partisan state, and that Joe Biden wouldn't have that hard of a time winning it. I think that Minnesota is likely for Biden. This is one that that Democrats won the governor race here by 7% last year in 2022. So I think that they would be able to hang on to Minnesota by a pretty good margin. I don't feel that Tim Scott would have anything special in the state of Minnesota. I think that's going to be it for the Democrats. Now going on to the Republicans for their likely states. Definitely Texas, that's a big one for them. Alaska, definitely. Florida shifts to the right a few points. This is just a shifting conservatives, shifting Republican state. So obviously we all know that. But Tim Scott would do just fine here, okay? He would not be a poor candidate in Florida at all. He definitely has that southern appeal. That helps him in Texas. That definitely helps him in Florida. That will help him in North Carolina and Georgia. Likely. So Ohio, I believe, stays likely. This is a state that was really swung to the Republicans during the Trump presidency, along with Iowa, and we'll get to Iowa. But Ohio definitely stayed partisan. We saw that in the Senate election this year. the Republicans won by just about the same margin that Trump was able to win both years. So out of Iowa right now, it's likely for Tim Scott. And I think that's going to be it for him. So after all likely states, Joe Biden still has the lead with 221 electoral votes. Tim Scott at 212, 270 are needed to win. So now we'll characterize our lean states. These states will be decided by 1 to 5%. Starting with the Democrats, Nebraska's 2nd district, I believe that Joe Biden will carry. He carried it by 6.6% in 2020. He'll do just a few points worse because we have to remember Tim Scott is probably a stronger candidate than Donald Trump. Where do we go next? We go to the state of New Hampshire. This is one where Tim Scott will have that more traditional conservative appeal, but not to bring race too much in this because I really don't think that race will play all that much of an issue. But I mean, New Hampshire is an overwhelmingly white state. It's not like Tim Scott expanding that GOP base to a more socially acceptable approach. It wouldn't help him all that much in New Hampshire. So New Hampshire stays with Biden by a lean margin. I think that Michigan stays with Biden. I don't believe that Tim Scott will have that much in the Rust Belt, okay? Especially in the blue wall. I don't feel that Tim Scott will be especially strong. I mean, he's like a Rubio figure in 2016, kind of like, how do I say this? I mean, Rubio would not have won these white working class men in the blue wall, and Tim Scott, I feel, is pretty similar to that. I just do not see him winning, these types of states. So the question is Pennsylvania lean for Biden? And I think it is. I feel that Biden wins Pennsylvania by just over a point against Tim Scott, and for all the same reasons, and that puts him at 260. He is almost there. So, that's it for Biden, I believe. Now we'll get into lean states for Tim Scott. Definitely Iowa. That's almost a likely state, but I don't feel that he would do as well as Trump. He really doesn't have anything in Maine 2nd. Remember, Obama won it by 8 in 2012. Trump won it by 8 in 2016. Trump won it by 8 in 2020. So Trump has this amazing appeal in Maine 2nd. Tim Scott won't quite have that, but he did make it so much more Republican. I think that those lingering Republican voters would turn out for Tim Scott enough for him to win there. North Carolina is definitely lean. If not, it will be likely. So definitely a 4 or 5 point win for Tim Scott there. Southern appeal right next to South Carolina. He will definitely turn out those Republican voters. He would be a very strong candidate in North Carolina. Where do we go next? I think that Tim Scott wins the state of Nevada by a lean margin, a very narrow margin, 1 to 2%. But we have to remember that Republicans do win in Nevada when the Democrat is not strong, and they have like a strong Republican. And Tim Scott, as a more traditional Republican, Joe Lombardo won the governor election this year. Adam Laxalt, who's closely affiliated with Trump, did not. So I feel that Tim Scott would be a very strong candidate for Nevada, and that he would be able to carry it. So that's it for lean states. I believe that the states of Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia will be tilt states, decided by less than 1%. And would you look at that? Joe Biden still does not have the win, nor does Tim Scott. So this will, as I said in the beginning, will be a very competitive election, based on my prediction right now. So, starting with Georgia, I think that Tim Scott takes back the state of Georgia, wins it by a tilt margin because, it's not like because Tim Scott is African American, he would turn out African American voters. No, he will not. The fact of the matter is, in 2020, Brian Kemp, a traditional Republican, a hardcore traditional Republican, if you will, won by 7. Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, won re-election by 8. A very anti-Trump moderate Republican. Herschel Walker, an African American, I mind you, but very closely aligned with Trump. As I said, not a traditional Republican, a Trump Republican, lost. While Kemp, Raffensperger all won by 7 and 8. But Tim Scott, I feel, is obvious. He's running against Trump. Obviously, he's not a Trump candidate. He is more of a traditional Republican. So I think that Tim Scott will take back the state of Georgia, and he wins its 16 electoral votes. Going to Arizona. Arizona is very tough, but this is another state where in 2022, Kari Lake was nominated for governor, Blake Masters was nominated for Senate. Both very Trump-aligned candidates. And just, 4 years ago, Doug Ducey was able to win by a small margin. He is a traditional conservative. He is a moderate Republican. I think that, especially with Joe Biden still being unpopular, we do have to remember that Biden is still an unpopular president. I think that Tim Scott wins the state of Arizona by a toe margin. So would you look at that? Tim Scott now has 268 electoral votes. Joe Biden at 260, 270 are needed to win. It all comes down to who I believe wins the state of Wisconsin. I believe that Joe Biden will win the state of Wisconsin. And, I already explained it earlier, but I just think that Wisconsin will be a lot closer. Tim Scott would just be a horrible candidate for the Rust Belt. Biden is nothing spectacular. And, like the white working class votes that Trump was able to take back in 2016, that turnout will be abysmal in this race because neither of these candidates, they will see really stand for them. But I think that Biden narrowly wins in Wisconsin. Tim Scott just has no appeal there. So look at that. I believe that Joe Biden wins by 2 electoral votes. But yeah, I believe that Joe Biden will win 270 electoral votes. Tim Scott will win 268. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. That would help me out a lot. And I'll see you all next time.